Taiwan's ruling party lost big in local elections. I talked to political scientist Nachman about his analysis.
We also look at how China is dealing with major protests against its strict COVID policies. This is Taiwan Insider.
Welcome to the show. Today we're going to talk about Taiwan's elections. But first, the world's eyes have been on protests in China. Protesters have been protesting against the strict zero COVID measures. Now, the major cities of Guangzhou and Chengchi announced an easing of COVID restrictions on Wednesday. But a heavy police presence has been reported in areas that saw protests. And they're even threatening protest supporters outside of China.
Protests continue in major Chinese cities against the country's strict zero-COVID policies. Police presence has increased among the protests, and the police are beginning to threaten supporters of the protest. Mr. Chen is a Chinese YouTuber in the United States. He shared a phone call he received from the Chinese police in one of his YouTube videos. The police threatened that he would be arrested for showing support for the white paper protest. When he asked if they knew where he was, the voice on the other end said they have a way to find his location. A couple of college students in Taiwan were asked about Mr. Chan's situation. One said it's wrong what the Chinese authorities were doing, and the YouTuber should watch out for his safety. Another said that everyone is free to express their thoughts on social media, as long as it does not endanger the rights of others. The opposition KMT party and prominent people in Taiwan have posted on Facebook, asking the Chinese government to hear the needs of its people. The ruling DPP party also held a press conference saying they stand in solidarity with the protesters.
How might all this affect Taiwan? Well, I asked political scientist at National Chengchi University, Nachman.
It's definitely a very novel moment in the sense that we haven't seen protests like this in quite some time at this scale, and that are this widespread throughout China. I think there's a lot of eagerness to make a prediction about what this means for the future of the PRC or Xi Jinping. And I think it's too early to tell. I think we often forget that the PRC is a very large authoritarian leviathan that is built to respond to these types of events. We're going to see a lot more crackdown on protesters much sooner than we're going to see any sort of hint at regime change.
And do you think that this could have a potential impact on Taiwan?
You know, I would be curious to see how long these protests last, but because they're happening after the local election, I think there's really no way to try to make them an electoral issue. If these were happening during, say, the 2024 elections, I think it would be a much more interesting conversation. But I'm very curious to see, which media in Taiwan picks up the story and how they discuss it.
Some people would say that if China is having inner turmoil, they may turn outward to instill nationalism, may attack Taiwan. It's more dangerous for Taiwan when things are going bad domestically in China. What do you think about that line of reasoning?
And I'm sympathetic to the idea, but I think that would really be only if there is a true domestic crisis. And I think protests happening for a few days is not a crisis domestically. Again, I think it's really a matter of seeing how these protests develop, if they grow, or if this is, letting off steam from civil society, and in a week or two, things go back to normal.
I also asked him about Taiwan's elections. Now, the ruling DPP only won 5 out of 22 local leadership seats. I asked him why the DPP suffered such a major loss.
I think it's important to keep in mind that there is no one grand explanation that can really explain the DPP's poor performance. I think there's a couple of intertwined explanations. The first of which, of course, it's a midterm local election, and in pretty much every democracy, the opposition party does better in midterms than the party in power. Historically, it's also important to remember that the KMT's local network ties are much stronger than the DPP's. And finally, there is just a sense of general dissatisfaction with the DPP, how they ran their election campaigns, the different candidates, and agenda setting that was done by the DPP, by their voter base. Even though you have this sort of poor performance from the DPP, it's also important to remember that these results are not indicative of a poor performance in 2024, nor are they indicative of the KMT doing well in 2024.
Do you think there's dissatisfaction with President Tsai Ing-wen?
Public opinion polls before the local election did not necessarily indicate that she was unpopular. I think framing these results as a de facto referendum on Tsai would be a bit of an overstatement. But, she is taking full responsibility for the party's lackluster results and has since stepped down as party chair.
So how do you think China might take advantage of the recent election results?
There's only so much it can really do because it's, one, very close to the national election, and two, even though mayors are in a position to have city-to-city diplomacy, ties between the PRC and Taiwan are so poor right now that I don't really know that there's going to be any sort of meaningful reach out from the PRC to any of these new KMT mayors.
How do you think that the TPP did, which is, Taipei Mayor Ko-wen-je's party?
Gao Hong'an doing well, I think, was definitely surprising given that there were so many scandals surrounding her campaign. What was more surprising is that Huang Sansan actually did much poorer in the polls than I think a lot of us anticipated. Now, Ko is likely to run for president regardless of how his party did in these local elections, but, without doing as well in Taipei as I think he had hoped, I think his momentum's a little bit slowed down. Obviously, Gao Hong'an is still a big victory, but because she's such a hot button no longer candidate, mayor-elect right now, I think it's really going to matter how she navigates sort of this next year as a new mayor with all these scandals and how much Ko wants to distance or not distance himself from her.
What do you think about the TPP's influence as a third party now?
I think it's still very much limited to a couple spots of Taiwan. I think Hsinchu and Taipei are where they have their biggest voter base. And the big challenge is there is not a very clear policy about what exactly it is they're offering beyond just the fact that they're not the KMT or the DPP. I think the TPP is going to be having a bit of an identity crisis as it goes into the 2024 election because its ability to stave off having to have a very clear party platform has worked so far. But as time goes on, it needs to be able to offer voters something more than just we're not the DPP or the KMT.
So Taipei Mayor Ko-wen-je has actually had a lot of city-to-city exchanges with Shanghai. And what do you think about his relationship with China and his China policy?
Yeah, that's really what lost a lot of his initial base of support. So when Ko first came out, he was very sympathetic to the Sunflower Movement, the New Power Party, these very pro-independence-leaning groups. And then he suddenly took a sharp turn and became much more open and warm to China. The infamous Liang An Yi Jia Qin saying that he kind of repeated quite a bit was sort of a deal breaker for a lot of his initial base of support. So even though Ko is someone who has taken advantage of these types of city-to-city relations in the past, it has not always politically worked out well for him. And it's really sort of pushed the TPP into being perceived as not really above blue-green politics and more of a light blue party.
So what do you think his China policy is?
Well, the TPP has said formally that their official stance on independence is very similar to that of the DPP and the KMT in that Taiwan is already a sovereign country as the ROC Taiwan and that there's no further need to change the current status quo. That's pretty standard. But, of course, beyond just that very nice rhetorical line, you see things like Guo Taiming and a bunch of former KMT politicians joining the TPP. And those politicians are not neutral. We know that they are very KMT and China-leaning. And so for them to be a part of the TPP speaks volumes more about what their China policy is, much more than just sort of the nice soundbite that they give to the media when asked the question.
Tensions are high between Taiwan and China, but residents of Taiwan's outlying islands are still asking the government to restore ferry services linking the two sides. Ferry services linking Taiwan's outlying island Jinmen to China were cut when the COVID-19 pandemic began. Now legislators are asking when the key link between the two countries will be restored. Transportation Minister Wang Guocai says his ministry has completed its preparations. The go-ahead now has to come from others. Wang says because restarting the ferry service touches on cross-strait issues, it needs approval from national security and Chinese affairs agencies. Reopening the ferry depends on relations between both sides and China's COVID restrictions. Official Qiu Cui-zheng says the government is doing all it can to restart services before the Lunar New Year in late January. Even as protests against COVID restrictions sweep through major Chinese cities, Jinmen residents believe that ferry services to China are central to the economy. Opposition legislator Chen Xuesheng says the government must understand public opinion in Jinmen. Otherwise, residents will start their own white paper protests like those in China. Lawmaker Zhang Mingzong says relations between people on both sides of the strait can continue to develop after the border opens. He hopes President Tsai Ing-wen can make it happen. With the Transportation Ministry giving their go-ahead, residents of Jinmen are hoping reconnecting with China will jumpstart their economy. And here are some stories on our radar.
Opposition KMT candidates won a landslide victory in Taiwan's local elections last Saturday. President Tsai Ing-wen resigned as the DPP chair after the party lost top leadership positions in 3 cities. Tsai said she takes responsibility for the party's losses and will review the election outcome. Kaohsiung Mayor Chengchi currently serves as the acting chair. Starting on Thursday, December 1st, people in Taiwan are no longer required to wear masks outdoors. The outdoor mask mandate has been in place since May 2021. Masks, however, are still required indoors except in specific situations like eating or exercising. School students will still need to mask up in classrooms unless masks affect the learning process. Dajia Mazu, a Taoist sea goddess, will be in Penghu for 4 days for the first time in its 400-year history. The statue of the goddess will visit 22 temples to strengthen religious relationships between Taiwan's main island and Penghu. Crowds of followers accompany the deity on her pilgrimage. The event organizers expect over 6,000 people to attend.
So starting today in Taiwan, masks are no longer required while outdoors. But I actually have a question for you about this, Natalie. When do you think Taiwanese people are actually going to take their masks off? Because, just to be clear, I went outside today and I saw exactly the same amount of people wearing masks.
I totally forgot that we didn't have to wear masks, so I wore my mask too. Mm-hmm. And then I asked a couple people around me, are you going to wear masks? And everyone's planning to wear their masks still. I don't know when, but I do have an answer for you.
Okay.
Okay. Rabbit. Year of the Rabbit.
Year of the Rabbit.
So that's next year after Lunar New Year is over? Or I mean the next Lunar New Year.
Oh, that's soon, you think?
Well, I think people will start like realizing, not everybody. I think there'll always be people wearing masks in Taiwan. Because people used to do that even before
It was
the
like
pandemic.
that before. But only when you were like sick, for example.
Right, or during the winter, right?
Yeah.
But I think by this time, during the new Lunar New Year, people will be used to, like, after all the festivities, they might be used to the idea, and the weather will gradually be getting warmer. So sometime during the Year of the Rabbit, next year.
Interesting.
What do you think?
I don't think I'm as optimistic as you. I think in 1 year.
So like 2024 maybe.
Yeah, I think maybe
Probably
in
2024.
early 2024 we're going to start seeing people take their masks off outdoors. And I think that's for a variety of reasons. I think one, like you said, is people have become really used to it here. I think it is more of a social convention at this point than like a medical reality. I think people just wear it because they have worn it for so long that they don't know any other way of living. Think of like, think about it. Think about the children too who like play with masks while outdoors. Not that I'm one of those people that are like, get them off the children. If you're a 6-7-year-old, it's been 3 years. Like most of your memories have been with masks. So, and I think people have just gotten very used to it. But I've also heard from people, even before they announced that they would end the outdoor mask mandate, which basically you haven't actually had to wear a mask for a while. They're saying like anything you do outside, you basically didn't have to wear a mask.
Well, exercising and eating, right? So you can.
Well, even walking.
Walking?
Yeah,
that
walking
counts as exercise.
Yeah, it counts as exercise. They said that
cheating.
like 4 or 5 months ago.
Oh, I don't remember that.
That was just like this very wink, wink, nudge, nudge, which they like. COVID here has been like that for many different things. There's been like a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, just like actually you can do this now. And so, but no, I think people are still a little scared. I think they're still a little afraid of the virus, which is, I think, totally understandable. And I also actually know some people who said that they don't want to, they like the anonymity of wearing a mask. Have you heard this from people?
I felt that way before.
Yeah. So I've talked to some people who said they like the anonymity.
What are they doing that they need
Nothing. They just I personally don't get it. But there's some people that they're just they don't want strangers
Maybe they're too beautiful, And
I think people just express so much through their facial features and also through their expressions that they just like to hide that, I think.
That's interesting.
So I think there are a variety of reasons, but I think it's actually going to take a long time for Taiwanese people to get used to what the rest of the world is doing, which is just like not wearing masks outdoors anymore.
Well, when it's cold, it's actually good for your health not to wear a mask.
Is that
you're
true?
less likely to get a cold.
Okay.
And also you're less likely to spread colds and germs, right? So
yeah, that's why I think it's good that they maintain the indoor mandate. This is like this kind of like seesaw that a lot of places in the world have done. That's like if cases go up, they'll reintroduce an indoor mandate, which is really helpful. But people won't do it because they just get used to not doing it anymore. So I think it's good that people like still in the metro and when they go into shops and stuff that they have this awareness and continue to wear masks, because I think it's a great habit to have, and I feel safer when I walk into an indoor space. Yeah.
Especially in dense cities like Taipei, right? People
Yeah.
everywhere. So I think we'll be seeing masks around here for a very long time. Well, thank you for watching Taiwan Insider today. I am Natalie So.
And I'm Itamar Waxman.
And do follow us on social media, subscribe, leave a comment below. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, you could follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, even on YouTube.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.